Latest developments related to the hypothesis of identification of the Statue of Liberty as a monument to Felice della Rovere. During the recent research into the life, achievements, and legacy of Felice della Rovere, it came to my attention that the Statue of Liberty has vague resemblance to the two confirmed depictions of Felice. The pictures included in this slide are for the demonstration of this preliminary reasoning. Separate part of that preliminary reasoning was the fact that the Statue of Liberty was conceptualized and produced in 19th century France, where ideas of Felice were extremely popular among artists, educated people, and political elites. For the record, Lady Liberty was supposed to be modeled after the mother of the sculptor, Frederick Auguste Bartholdi, 1834–1904. Bartholdi lived and worked in France and USA, and in the 19th century the French government opened intelligence archives to a few select artists like William Adolphe Bouguereau, 1825–1905, and Jean-Auguste Dominique Ingres, 1780–1867. Their art was not a result of their own research. On another hand, Bartholdi could have considered Felice his second mother, just like Giorgio Vasari did. In spite of all his fame, Bartholdi is an enigma as an artist. This presentation does not contain any documented revelations or smoking gun findings. It is strictly visual and historical references. Some copyright infringements are possible, as best images of the Statue of Liberty and other landmarks are modern. If commercial development will ever be conceived, the replacement flyover imaging might be ordered for the purpose of compliance. This video and the research it is based on are not the product of artificial intelligence or any other automated research and writing tools. The material is new, and not all statements in this video have the same potential to withstand the test of additional research, time, and reason. Use at your own discretion. And you know what? All rights reserved. The narrative is heavily dependent on the supplied visual material. Please, do not hesitate to pause the video to get a better look. From past experience, it is known that some viewers are irritated by the narrated voice. Please, keep in mind that you can mute the sound and simply read from the slides. The slides will continue to change after narration is finished in the background. I do not have a quality of voice and performing ability to do my own voiceovers. The budgetary considerations are also a factor in the choice of robotic voiceover versus a live one. Questions and comments are welcome. For quick reference, here is a note about who Felice della Rovere was. She is the woman who radically altered human history. She is also a strong contender for the person with the most artistic depictions, both contemporary and posthumous, in the history of humanity. The fisherman's daughter is a pope's, St. Peter's, daughter. It is young Felice della Rovere. Just like many others, William Adolphe Bouguereau struggles to figure out the roots of her motivation and determination. Whatever it is, this angry child is an image of a power that advanced the progress of humanity by 200 years, at very least. She did it by effectively flashing down the drain two world religions as if they were just some dead hamsters. Notably, it cost a number of lives, including her own. For the ordinary person, it is advisable to think about Felice as Madame Aspirin. Imagine having a mild headache and coming to the pharmacy for some aspirin, commercially available from 1899, in 2026. The pharmacist just rolls eyes and advises that aspirin is on backorder for another 73 years. Stop by in 2099. Try some leeches for now, they might work. It is mostly because of Felice that this kind of dialogue is a joke. Depictions or images of Felice are easy to categorize by lineage, going all the way back to one or more lifetime images by artists who knew her in person. In spite of obvious differences, Raphael, Perugino, and Francisco de Zurbaran made paintings of the same woman. In this particular line of images of Felice is Justice Tonda, by Raphael, fresco, circa 1508 to 1510, on the ceiling of Stanza della Segnatura in the Raphael Rooms, in the Vatican. This is Felice with her 4 children, 3 sons and daughter. One son looks different because Raphael is the father. Felice sometimes depicted having a temper. She probably disciplined kids using the broom or fly swatter. Another notable detail is footwear, as in most depictions in this series Felice is barefoot. The particular importance of this image for this narrative is underscored on the following slides. As shown in this slide, the crown that Felice is wearing on the Tonda and the Statue of Liberty have 7 spikes or points. Also, feet. The Statue of Liberty has feet that are only partially visible from the ground, and making her to look like she is either walking or posturing, are looking similar to Raphael's Tonda, and some other details have similarities. There is no information if the number of spikes on the crown of Felice on the Tonda has any particular significance or secret meaning. On this slide is a very early sketch that Bartholdi presented in the USA, preserved in a couple of places including the Library of Congress. Among the notable things is the very modest crown of the proposed statue, very much like Felice is wearing in the Tonda by Raphael. Also notable are the rays of light coming out of the head of the statue, brain of Felice. Most probably Bartholdi was thinking about using an electrical arc lamp that was invented and developed in 19th century. Obvious shortcoming of this design would be a markedly different look of the statue at nighttime and daytime, and eventually metal spikes familiar today replaced the electric light proposal. This slide showcasing the early model of the Statue of Liberty recently sold at auction by the descendants of Édouard Laboulaye, the French academic who first envisioned the statue together with Bartholdi. The crown of this terracotta statuette, about 40 inches tall, has much more developed rays or spikes. They are about 3 times longer than original Felice on Justice Tonda has, in relation to the size of other body parts, but not yet greatly emphasized as on the finished statue. The statuette had a piece of broken chain in the left hand that some observers and scholars attributed as an allusion to abolition of slavery not so long before the statue endeavor got underway. What is curious is that this terracotta mock-up still can be classified as belonging to the series of images related to the timeless Leda, unwed teenage mother and her child by Raphael, her lover and child's father. Here presented yet another image of Felice, Allegory of Patience, circa 1571 by Giovanni Maria Butteri, 1540–1606. He was a pupil of Alessandro Allori and Francesco Salviati. It needs to be said that Felice did not pose naked for various artists. All her naked paintings are artistic extrapolations. As for Raphael, he just caught a glimpse of their domestic life when they cohabitated as teenagers. In this painting Felice is naked and chained, not unlike in a different series of her paintings where she is depicted as Andromeda. She is by the cut-down tree, symbolizing Raphael who died young, with a green sprout, symbolizing Girolamo, her second son with Raphael born when Raphael and Felice reunited after her marriage fell apart. Girolamo Orsini lived to adulthood, unlike Felice's firstborn who died in infancy. As for the statuette in question, her breasts most obviously resemble the perky youthful breasts of young Felice that Raphael depicted when they were together as teens. Felice on Patience is more mature, as Raphael died in 1520 and Girolamo, her second child by Raphael, was her last child. She gave birth 6 times and 4 of her children lived to adulthood. Strikingly, the midsection, mirror of Raphael's sketch, and left hand of the statuette are nearly exact copies of a Patience depiction, so is the left foot. That said, the chains that, by the way, is still present near the feet of the Statue of Liberty in New York, probably came from the different series of depictions of Felice, the already mentioned Andromeda series. This slide highlights the understanding of the Felice della Rovere Andromeda cycle. From Saint Margaret, Felice, and the Dragon by Raphael, as a dragon, to Andromeda by Paolo Veronese, same dragon and same woman. Titian repeated Veronese's Andromeda with unflattering nuances. Andromeda Unchained, Chains Are Broken, the Same Woman, by Guido Reni with her counterpart being the sect of John the Baptist personified in its last significant leader, Josephus Flavius from the School of Athens. Goes without saying that all of that is early modern erotica paintings. The chains are the allusion to the inability of Felice to marry Raphael. first because she was married to her husband and later because of the constraints of social conventions and the rules of nobility. Defying those rules, she made Raphael's son heir to the titles and land, starting the dynasty that lasted 200 years before turning female. While the future Statue of Liberty was in the stage of preliminary discussions and crude renderings, backlash started against the possibility that the statue would show too much skin or female body parts, just because it originated from France. It looks like Frédéric Auguste Bartholdi was not yet ready to dress his statue in a burlap potato sack in the way it is known to look today in the New York harbor. In the Musée d'Orsay in Paris there is a copy of the Statue of Liberty that was acquired by the French state from the sculptor himself back in 1900. Not only this copy still showcases the perky breasts of young Felice, it also shows how Bartholdi resigned to the reality that identifying the sculpture as Felice using body posturing would not be feasible due to extremely prudish American expectations and resorted to different means to assert the identification of Felice as a true meaning and inspiration of his work. It is reasonable to suspect that when Bartholdi reworked the statue into the Musée d'Orsay version he used the painting of Felice by Andrea Mantegna. At least when it comes to face, headgear and positioning of feet the similarities are obvious. It goes without saying that Mantegna depicted Felice in the pivotal point in her life, in theological dispute with her father, Pope Julius II, the dispute that ended Christianity as a religion around 1506. There are a couple of serious problems with taking this route, however. It is possible that Andrea Mantegna never even saw Felice in person and just aged/modified her other depiction. The image itself is not part of the series, and, frankly, I am sure that this is Felice because of the unmistakable presence of Julius II. Also, I think the reference to the Bartholdi's mother comes from this variant as face is amazingly lifelike. Following the guidance and examples of the cryptic depictions of Felice from the earlier centuries and very much in the same way as William Adolphe Bouguereau used to identify his subject as Felice in his Pietà, Bartholdi used hands from the known, official portrait of Felice by Sebastiano del Piombo as a definite pointer to the true identity of the person immortalized in his giant statue. Hands of the finished statue retain the design pioneered in the Musée d'Orsay version. By the way, William Adolphe Bouguereau depicted Felice with dying or dead Raphael who was in agony for several days because of the marginal dose of the arsenic. Raphael was one of the fallen in the fight led by Felice. His death in 1520 forever divided thinking humanity into those who were with Felice and those who were with killers of Raphael. There are few more important points that can be deduced from the careful comparisons of the version from the Musée d'Orsay and the final version in New York. Most obviously spikes of the crown got their final shape and proportions in the Musée d'Orsay version and are faithfully reproduced in the final work. Another detail is a tablet in the statue's left hand. This specific shape of the tablet is called tabula ansata, Latin for tablet with handles. It was a favorite form for votive tablets in Imperial Rome. The inscription on the tablet, containing Roman numerals for day and year, was not present yet in the Musée d'Orsay version. I would like to bring up the fact that the inscription and feet of the statue are not visible to the observers on the ground. While hot air balloons existed in the mid-19th century, launching one on a small island with strong winds and tall structure nearby would be really dangerous, and as far as I know was never attempted. That strange propensity of Bartholdi to undertake the work that none of his contemporaries would ever see and appreciate compels me to put forward a hypothesis that Bartholdi was communicating something to us, living a long time after. In addition to the two facts, Roman tablet and Roman numerals, there is another interesting tidbit. Bartholdi claimed that he was inspired by a Roman goddess/personification named Libertas. It looks like Bartholdi tried really hard to compel us to take a close look at the city of Rome, in Italy. On a side note, at the time when the Statue of Liberty was designed, the USA had not yet developed true imperial aspirations and corresponding cultural associations with the Roman Empire that exist on the fringes of American culture today. At this point the narrative takes a mysterious turn. I am not particularly excited about the hassle of traveling, but something compelled me to participate in a conference in Rome this year to report on Leonardo da Vinci and his Last Supper, that is not in Rome. I was staying in a modest hotel in the converted historical building about 2 minutes' walk from the imposing Trevi Fountain, and the conference was about 5 minutes walk from there. As a part of the conference lore, there was an expedited city tour on foot. I cannot say about other participants, but I paid every cent of my expenses by myself, and that takes a lot of allure out of attending conferences. It goes without saying that I have seen a ton of plaques on the buildings, in Latin and with Roman numerals. It is a tourist deception going all the way back to 18th century. That was also probably the last time Rome repaved the walkways. If you like gelato, can move on foot and are tolerant of crowds, you will be fine visiting Rome. During the aforementioned visit to Rome, a pedestrian sightseeing tour took me to the Piazza del Popolo, a lovely touristy place which is a fine example of careful blending of the eras. What the general public, including me, rarely pays attention to is that the latest redesign of the Piazza del Popolo occurred during the French annexation of Papal States, in 19th century. The chief architect of the works was Giuseppe Valadier, an experienced and renowned Italian architect. While the Piazza del Popolo has enough attractions to spend at least a day exploring, our speedy tour guide was done and moving on in about 15 minutes. Fate would have it, most of that time we spent by the fountain of nobody knows what is it. As I come to understand it, it is one of the two fountains created by the sculptor Giovanni Seccarini, 1822–23. The second fountain, Neptune, is across the whole plaza and barely visible from the first one. The rushed sightseeing tour of ours never even approached it. However short was my encounter with the Piazza del Popolo and the fountain, it was enough to recognize that I stumbled onto something very important. But before taking a closer look at the fountains, it is very helpful to take a look at the time when those fountains were conceived and erected. As mentioned, Papal States and the city of Rome became fully dependent on France, and in France it was the period of restoration, of monarchy. For a moment everybody thought that the ancient regime is back in all its glory. So it happens, precisely at the time in question France discreetly celebrated the 300-year anniversary of embracing reason by the French monarchy and the French government and security services. That was 300 years since one huge advancement for humanity took place. One of the people who celebrated was French ambassador to the Holy See, de facto ruler of Rome 1817–1824, Pierre-Louis Jean Casimir de Blocas. We know about his role and his views because he also ordered painting, shown on the left, by Jean-Auguste Dominique Ingres, considered in detail in a separate presentation. Tags show who is who on this painting. The painting clearly reflects on the fact of France embracing the body of works by Leonardo da Vinci, his body of works related to his assessment of Christianity and not available to the general public. It also reflects on the role of Felice della Rovere, one-time student of Leonardo, in the motions that made the move of Leonardo to France and his straightforward presentation to the King Francis I possible and safe from fears of prosecution. It is suspected that Felice established a correspondence with King Francis and used this connection to introduce Leonardo to the king as someone who is serious and can be scientifically relied upon. She was in position to address the king as a brother. She was illegitimate, but her father, Pope Julius II, was an acting head of state. Francis was legitimate, but his father was never a king. On the more nuanced view, the painting reflects on the fact that the king entrusted newly obtained knowledge with French security services, diplomatic corps, state administrators and top clergy when Leonardo passed away. For his service to France, Leonardo got government upkeep and state funeral. It is obvious that de Blocas highly valued Leonardo's work, still hidden with French security services to this day, and naturally wanted to honor him in Rome, in his home country. De Blocas was, most obviously, familiar with the role of Felice. And there is nothing more natural for the highly skilled diplomat to use the occasion of renovation of Piazza del Popolo that was underway at that time to immortalize his, and French, heroes in their homeland. I happen to think that de Blocas directed the design of the fountains to showcase Felice and Leonardo. Felice della Rovere is back to Rome. French troops unite France and Italy under the power of Felice. City of Rome, her city, is now under her feet. It is not difficult to see that Giovanni Seccarini made his female figure to have a similar left breast, belly, right hand, holding a scroll, and helmet with the figure of Minerva, Felice, from the Forge of Vulcan, by Giorgio Vasari, 1564. Felice gave birth 6 times and Vasari replaced one of her kids with himself. While there, Giorgio Vasari depicted himself as a craftsman who makes Felice's armor. Knowing that Giorgio Vasari was a devoted adherent of Felice sheds a new light on the whole perspective on the history of art as a science. Giorgio Vasari as a writer still has an enormous influence on what we know and how we think about art from the time of Felice. It needs to be noted that real Felice gave birth 6 times and lived to be about 53 years old. Titian painted Flora in line with Raphael's sketch, but the visual changes he reflected might as well be real as he met Felice in her later years. When Giovanni Seccarini executed his 90-degree turn from the depiction of Giorgio Vasari, he most likely was mindful of the look of Felice in her more mature years. Yet another approach that is noted in the sculpture on the Piazza del Popolo fountain is enlarged, exaggerated facial features, not unlike facial features of David by Michelangelo. That approach is needed for any statue that is significantly larger than life size. Without it, the face of the statue would look bland and small for the observers on the ground. Faces of very tall statues were not meant to be observed up and close by mechanical proximity or optical enlargement means, but by the naked eye of passerby on the ground. Yet another misconception needs to be addressed. The guide in Rome and Wikipedia will describe the statue as Goddess Roma. Curiously, the sculptor took steps to prevent that misconception. Right by the feet of Felice is a legendary she-wolf. She-wolf is a symbol of Rome. There is no justification for creative redundancy in this composition. Roma is not even a real goddess, she is a personification of Rome that is sometimes depicted to accompany Roman emperors on the triumph reliefs. Known cult of Roma is rare and known from far-flung cities of the Roman Empire but not from Rome itself. This slide is to illustrate 3 depictions of Leonardo da Vinci among the 2 fountains of Piazza del Popolo. This repetition is possibly a reflection of the respect that the sponsor of the project, Ambassador Casimir de Blocas, held for Leonardo. It is curious how the sculptor in Florence repeated the facial likeness of Leonardo/Neptune from Rome. This was an intentional repetition to provide extra reference to reinforce the notion. It is much in line with the way the whole body of artworks related to intellectual resistance operated. We now know that the real Leonardo da Vinci looked slightly different, as depicted on the right, and, most obviously, 2 different sculptors separated by 170 miles and 10 years would not independently arrive at the same final depiction unless there was an intent to produce a copy. With somewhat less certainty, 2 companion sculptures of the Neptune fountain can be identified as Leonardo's companions Salai and Francesco Melzi. Those 2 accompanied Leonardo on his trip to France that was so pivotal to the whole of humanity. Now, after this giant detour, back to the chase. My stupid trip to Rome actually paid off. Felice della Rovere crossed the Atlantic. Those 2 statues have way more facial similarities than any unintentional or inspirational reasons allow to suggest. And they less than 50 years apart originated in cities of Paris and Rome with durable cultural connections going back centuries and the contemporary French connection traceable as well. The design of the pedestal in New York can be interpreted as yet an additional clue. The pictures provided are self-explanatory. 3 window openings are carried over from Leonardo's Last Supper to Raphael's School of Athens and Titian's Venus of Urbino. Detailed meaning of those windows described in the separate presentations about those works of art and conclusions are repeated on this slide. The architect of the pedestal was Maurice Hunt, who studied in Paris and had an opportunity to get familiar with ideas of Felice and her story. Here is the quick recap of what this presentation attempted to demonstrate. Statue of Liberty in New York has crown developed from the crown of Felice on the Justice Tonda by Raphael, has feet from the painting of Felice by Andrea Mantegna, has hands of Felice from the portrait of her by Sebastiano del Piombo, and has face of Felice from the sculpture by Giovanni Seccarini. If it walks like a duck, swims like a duck, and quacks like a duck, it probably is a duck. I will withhold any speculations about what the statue actually means, both now and when it was erected. It is a 250th anniversary of the USA and is as good a time as any to ask the right questions and get the right answers. And while there, finally get papers of Leonardo and Felice from the French and NATO secret archives. To make search of the archives little livelier, a consideration of the opening an investigation into attempted murder of Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis in 1963 in Dallas, that notably does not have a statute of limitations, could be on the table as well. 5 centuries after the life and death of Felice, getting close to her still can be deadly. As for the question of who is more important to the history, Felice or Leonardo, it greatly depends on who you ask. Very young Peter Paul Rubens getting his candle lit from the candle of Felice. Felice is artistically aged in the style of Caravaggio, yet another artist who lived, painted and died for the ideas of Felice. Rubens reiterated that he received a holy grail of knowledge from her and carried it on to next generations. Rubens and Felice most obviously never met in person. Ambassador de Blocas, however, favored Leonardo. He obviously had better access to the archives.